Good morning and welcome to Free Advice Friday. My name is Keri Barnum for New Shelves Books, and we are here to talk about the business of being an author, publishing, marketing, and everything in between. So we are very excited to be here live. You can join us at newshelves.com/FAF. We meet every Friday at 10 a.m. Or, of course, you can watch the replays over on YouTube, which is just New Shelves Books on YouTube. We have a couple of questions live and a couple of questions that were emailed as well. So we're going to get started with these. Jackie's first question is best tips for query letters for children's fiction books. Well, no matter what genre that you are planning to query in, my best piece of advice for querying authors is read the instructions, follow the instructions. You would think that would be the first thing that most authors do, but most authors, how do I say this? I won't say most authors. Many authors will think, well, this is what they asked for, but I think I should send this, or it's important to me to send this. And so authors will send things that were not asked for. They won't send things in the format that was asked for, and they don't follow the instructions. The instructions are a test. If you're not following the instructions exactly, then many times an agent will just go, oh, they're going to be difficult to work with, or they don't read instructions, not worth my time. So very first, biggest tip is read the directions, follow the directions, because it's going to get you far. The other thing I would say for query letters is there's so many resources for how to write a good query letter. Jane Friedman has a bunch. There's a lot of classes, like Writer's Digest does classes. But make yourself, not make yourself available, use those available resources. And a lot of them are free or very inexpensive. There's books, use them because these people know what they're talking about and they're really good. And a lot of times they'll even give examples for different genres. But typically it's we're introducing you and why you're the right person to write this book. You're introducing your book. And then you kind of have to tell me how it's the same as other books being published, but different. Because that's what we want. We want to know how a book is the same as other popular books that are currently selling, but different. It's got to have a twist. What makes your book different? What's going to make your book stand out in a plethora of books? And so that's one of the things to keep in mind is that when we're looking at comp titles, which is part of writing a query letter, when you're looking at comps, you really want to find number one, current and recognizable comps. I can't tell you how many times I ask an author for comps. They're like, well, there's this one book. It's exactly like my book, but it was written in 1972 and it's not for sale anymore. This is not a good comp. A comp should be something that is well-known and recognizable, or at least if I look it up, it's still currently selling, because if it's sold in the 70s, doesn't mean it's selling now. And sometimes for good reason. So when you're looking at your comps, definitely look at current comps, look at popular comps. Do not go find me a book on Amazon that has 14 reviews or even 40 reviews. It's not popular enough. So make sure you're looking for current and popular reviews. Sometimes you can mix in like pop culture. You can mix in like a TV show or a movie. Sometimes that works. But the same, but different. How is your book like this? Maybe it's a children's book in the style of The Book with No Words, which is a children's book. Or is it The Book with No Pictures? I always get it confused. Anyway, in the style of this, but it's different because, we're teaching kindness or something. So that is what makes those things stand out. Follow the directions. Do not be too lengthy. If you pique their interest, you will have time to make further introductions to talk more about your story and your excitement later. Also, unless you are an illustrator and you are hoping to write and illustrate your own book, typically you do not talk about illustrations for a children's book. If it's what you said, children's fiction, you didn't say picture book, but if it is a children's picture book, you're not going to talk about the illustrations because typically the publisher is going to have their own illustrator unless you are doing both. So that's one of the things. And yes, Jane mentioned that ChatGPT is good at finding great comps. This is a way to use ChatGPT. I'm looking for books like this, or you find one of your good comps and then you ask it for more good comps. This is the perfect use for AI in this case. Um, Comps is not competitors, it's comparable titles. So we're not in competition. Readers read a lot of books, but they are comparable titles. And that's what we're looking for. And absolutely great use of AI in time saving here, at least to get you started. You still have to vet the list. Like, don't just assume it's correct. But that's a great way to use that. So biggest tips, just follow the instructions. Let's see. Yeah, so to use ChatGPT for comps, you don't have to put your whole book in there. What you would do is you either find a comp that you know is good, and then you find comps for the comp. So, what are some comparative titles for, um, I don't know, my mind is blanking out today. What are some comparative titles for Anna Karenina? And it'll bring up some comparative titles. And if Anna Karenina is a comp title to your book, then you have a list of comps. Or you give it your description. Find me 5 comp titles for this book, and you put the description in. The book is adult fantasy geared towards women between 30 and 45. And there you go. It's going to give you some comps. And it'll take some time to refine it, but it really does spit out some options quickly. And it helps you from staring at a blank screen. It gives you some direction and inspiration. Yes. If you missed last week, we are going to get that up on YouTube for the replay. But in the meantime, little secret, if you miss a week and you would like to go watch it, I do live stream most times to Facebook, and the Facebook video will stay on our Facebook page for like 30 days. So if you missed it and you want to watch it before it shows up on YouTube, you can always check there. And then, of course, if you subscribe to YouTube, then you'll get a notification when that goes live. Yes. I see what you say, Bob, and yes, I will cover that. Tomorrow, how important are editorial reviews for a self-published picture book? Most are paid for self-publishers. If you could afford just one, what's the most respected and important? Well, first, I will say that even self-published authors and publishers can submit for editorial reviews, meaning you're submitting, you're not guaranteed. So that's what I recommend. Don't just go pay for one, follow the rules and submit for a free editorial review. It does carry more clout, and if you get it, fantastic, you didn't pay anything for it. So I would always suggest that you start with submitting for the free reviews. But if you're going to pay for a review, I have 3 that are kind of my personal go-to. I love Midwest Book Review. It's very much geared towards the library market. And they only charge a $50 reader fee, which is really inexpensive for a review. So I love Midwest Book Review for that. If I'm going to pay for a more expensive review, my 2 go-tos would be Book Life, which is the indie arm of Publishers Weekly, or Kirkus, with a caveat. Um, Kirkus is known for being pretty harsh in their reviews. If they like a book, great. If they don't, meh. And a lot of people have been saying, especially more lately, that it feels like it's just a regurgitation of the book, and then you have one line that is like worth quoting. That's kind of normal, to be honest, for a paid review. But Kirkus, you can pay $400 for a Kirkus review, and they rip your book to shreds, and you've got nothing to use. Um, and that stinks. It really stinks, and it is what it is. So there is that danger. But if you get a positive Kirkus review, I do feel like it holds more weight because they are known for being kind of tough critics. So risk reward, you have to figure that one out. And then Book Life, again, is the indie arm of Publishers Weekly. And I think just because it's tied to Publishers Weekly, they do highlight kind of if there are certain books that they feel really deserve to be highlighted, they will highlight them in their magazine and on their website. So Book Life is another one that I would trust in. And those are the like my top 3 go-to if I'm looking at any type of paid review. See. Yes, Cheryl's asking about KDP's beta for virtual voice narration. And actually, that was on my list. So, KDP has had what is called virtual voice for some time now. I think it's been almost a year that virtual voice has been out. But the virtual voice is essentially it's AI books. It's only open to KDP published books and it's in beta testing. So it's not available to everyone, but it seems like Amazon has just sent out a new slew of invitations. I've gotten no less than 6 people asking me about it because they got um, the invitation. And so they are opening it up for more beta testing for virtual voice, which is their AI audiobooks. And I have a lot of people asking, should I do it? Should I not do it? And all the things in between. So let's talk about it. As far as how do I know if it's a legit invitation or not? You guys know I always say, don't click on a link, go to your KDP account, log in. If you are in, if it's legitimate on your bookshelf or your book is listed, it will say this book is eligible for virtual voice. You cannot miss it. That way, you know it's legitimate. If by any chance you're kind of like, well, I don't know if it's legitimate, just go log in. Don't click on anything in the email. As far as virtual voice, like where do these books sell? Well, number one, they are marked as being read by AI. It does say that on the sales page. They are sold on Amazon. There are people can buy them, read them through Amazon, Audible, and Alexa. That is where they are available. And they are really, really easy to use. As in, I created an audiobook the other day in less than 5 minutes. You essentially just say, yep, I'd like to do it. It takes you over to a kind of a creation screen. It automatically takes your table of contents from KDP, from your ebook version, and brings it over and it brings that whole ebook over. So make sure your ebook is all updated and everything. But it brings it over to the creation spot. It gives you 8 different voices to choose from, and you can listen to them. Some sound more like AI than others, in my opinion. And then you can go ahead and you say, I'd like this voice to read my book. And then it does it. I would recommend that you listen through the book and proof it, especially if you have difficult to say names, if you're writing fantasy and you have made up names or places, because I have seen that kind of trip people up. So I do recommend that you listen and proof the audiobook if you might have any words that might trip the AI up. And it's honestly kind of easy. If you have a name, for example, that the AI is pronouncing incorrectly, you highlight the name and you can listen to how it's saying it. And then you can phonetically spell out what you want it to sound like. You can test it. And if it sounds correct, you say, yeah, that's it. It gives you the option to change just that one instance of the word or name, or to select and change them all. So you literally can, with one fix, change it through the entire book, which is very convenient. And one of the things that I noticed that is new, I believe, with virtual voice is it used to be that you got to pick one AI voice and that was it. They now have it where you can change the voice from chapter to chapter. So if you are doing a dual POV book with a male and a female, you can change each chapter. You can change each chapter to have a different virtual voice going back and forth. And I believe that's new. That's very cool because it's got nice features. So it sounds pretty glowing, right? It's beautiful. These books do typically sell for less because they're AI and, it's not human narrated. So these typically, I tend to see the price range more around what an ebook would cost. I believe they have to stay under $14.99, but most of the time I see these AI audiobooks, the lowest price is $3.99. The highest I think is $14.99. And I tend to see most people selling these around the $3.99 to $7.99 price point for the audiobook with virtual voice. And so I think that is one of those things. Um, as far as that goes. And they also have a connection where if your book is in Kindle Unlimited, it will go in Audible Plus, which means Audible subscription users can like listen free, and it's kind of a lot like Kindle Unlimited. And it also, if they're buying the ebook, they can add on the audiobook for $1.99. So if they're buying one, they can do an add-on feature, which is nice as well. Now, all of that said, it sounds wonderful, right? Why aren't we all doing it? There's a couple reasons of why people aren't doing this. If you are ever intending to do a human narrated audiobook, I do not recommend that you use virtual voice. It does muddy the waters when you've already got something out there if you're intending to do human narration at a later date. So I don't recommend it then. The other thing is know your audience. If your audience are big fans of creators and things and they're not going to like the AI audio, don't do it. Just don't. But for a lot of books, especially if it's a book that's not selling very well, I have an author I work with who she sells her audio rights to be published by a publisher. She's self-published and she does very well. But her audio rights, she doesn't want to deal with it. So she sells or licenses the rights for her audiobooks to a publisher and they take care of it. But the publisher doesn't want some of her books that are too short. They're not in their series. It just doesn't sell as well. And for those, she's done the virtual voice books because it makes them more accessible. And she knows that she's never going to turn them into a human narrated audiobook. And one of her platforms is very much based on accessibility, especially with the visually impaired. And so she just made them available. It didn't cost her anything. By the way, KDP Virtual Voice is completely free. And so that's a really good reason to do it. So those are the things I would say. Also, when you're doing a virtual voice book, you do not have to publish it. You can go play around and listen and not publish it if you don't want to. And you can edit it once it's live. You can go on and edit and say, I actually don't like that voice. Let me change it. And it's pretty easy to do. So there are a lot of pros for it. I think there's a lot of reasons why people might use it, but it's not a good fit for every book, in my opinion. So yeah, I think it's interesting that that comes on the heels of our conversation with Mike Steele last week, where we were talking about human narration in audiobooks. And I think, like everything, there's a place for certain things. There's a place for where quick and easy and accessibility makes sense, and where art and having something that is different makes sense. So you have to find out what's right for you in your books in particular. But that's my take on it. Definitely explore it. It's interesting to see, and it is very easy to use. I do have a couple of people who I've said, yeah, I think this would be great for this series or this book. It's low investment. And I have not heard of anyone making a lot of money with these. I do need to say that. I'm in a lot of author groups, and I've even asked, has anyone really made a lot of money with these? And most people are saying, no, I haven't made a lot of money. I've made some money, but not a lot. And so that's something to remember too, is that some people just don't want to listen to AI, and not yet anyway, although I think it's expanding. It's not usually a huge money maker, but it costs you nothing. And if it earns you something and you weren't planning on doing human narration, then hey, why not? Is kind of the feeling there. Yeah. And I will say the voices have also gotten better over time. I was in an account that had this beta test for virtual voice very early on. You can actually, I think they kept some of the voices, but they also added new ones, and you can tell a huge difference. So it's come a long way. And if you take the time to edit and things like that, it can be a great tool, to be honest. All right, let's see. I answered that one there. I've been told to watch the campaign settings and Amazon ads. There's a new box called Maximize Spend and Minimize Spend. Authors need to watch that and check Minimize to avoid spending more money. Yes, as always, Amazon and Amazon ads are adding new features they're playing around with that will show up in the dashboard. There's quite a few of the new features that I don't personally use a lot yet because they're still working out the kinks. But yes, there are different opportunities to like maximize spend or minimize spend in certain areas. Be very careful when pushing those buttons if you're not monitoring regularly, because sometimes they do spend your money, or it means they can spend more money. They can spend a percentage over. So be very careful with those. You do not have to report if your book is read by an AI voice, because if it's done through virtual voice, they know, and KDP puts it on the sales page that it's virtual voice. And Amazon does not accept any AI audiobooks that are not from virtual voice. So you can't like make one in 11 labs and then try to distribute it on Amazon. They don't allow you to do that. If you're using a AI audiobook voice, it has to be done through virtual voice. They know it's AI and they do report it on their sales page at the moment. Um, how those rules will play out in the future, I'm not sure. If a book is 2 years old, is it okay to submit it for a review to either Midwest Books or Book Life? Most of the time they will take a book that's older. Yes, if you're paying for a review, not submitting for a free review, but you're paying for a review, typically they will take an older book. However, at that point, I personally would not be investing in reviews for a book. The book at that point is kind of older. And so I personally would not be investing in a editorial review 2 years in. I don't think that it's worth it. You cannot control emotional tone throughout with KDP AI voice. You cannot. Their AI voices are getting better, but you cannot control that. Let's see. Make sure I get this question that was emailed in. Let me just double check that one. A question that I got in was, if I'm changing the price of my book for a print run, do I have to change my ISBN number? And the answer is no. You can change your price pretty much at any time. So if you are doing a print run and your cost, how much the book cost is on the book, it's printed in the barcode, which should be if you're trying to work with retail sales. You do not have to change your ISBN to change the price. You just change the price and update it everywhere in Bowker and in your sales systems, and you should be good to go. So you might have to update your barcode or what's printed on the book if you change the price, but you do not have to change your ISBN to do that. Let's see, we did that one. Get to that one. Oh, and a question from an author about using attribution, Amazon attribution links. The question came up is, if I'm using an Amazon attribution link in the back of my book. So for example, I want to track if people are clicking on my next in series and going to buy or read it. How do I set that up? Because there is no, my publisher's not listed in the attribution links. So if you are using Amazon attribution links, this will make sense to you. If you're not, we won't spend too long on it. But if you're using Amazon attribution links, and I do have a video on how to set up Amazon attribution links, and that is on YouTube, so you can find it there. And essentially, an Amazon attribution link is a link to your tracking information that lets you see what actions people are taking once they click on that link. Very handy for tracking like read through one book to another in the back of your book, because you can put a link that takes them to book 2 in your series, and Amazon tracks the user behavior once they click on it, what happens on Amazon. You can use these in Facebook ads to see what happens when someone clicks on your Facebook ad and goes to Amazon. So it's very handy to have. And I highly recommend using them to get more data on your ads there. Technically, this is also still in beta, although it's been in beta for a long time. And it helps you get more data. It's not perfect as far as tracking, but it does better than nothing. So I do recommend using them. And if you are trying to set up a attribution link for a platform that's not listed, like it will list TikTok and Facebook and different things. If you're trying to set it up for your back end and you're like, it doesn't say publisher, it doesn't have my name in here. You just create one. You go to new, you put your publisher name in, and then you just select the options. The important thing to know is when you're setting up these attribution links, the information is only for sorting and filtering purposes on the back end because all of your data shows up kind of like in an Amazon ad dashboard. So it's just for internal purposes for the back end. So how you label these doesn't really matter so long as it makes sense to you. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on those attribution links. I did drop in the chat, I dropped in the YouTube tutorial for how to set that up though, if you're interested. Let's see. IBPA is now offering a 1-month NetGalley subscription. Do you think 1 month is long enough to get several reviews? Is NetGalley worth it? I think that NetGalley, for those of you who don't know, is a very well-known review platform where publishers and authors can put their books up and offer them to NetGalley subscribers or users for free. And then NetGalley asks them to review the book. So it's a really good review system. I think that some books get a lot of attention. They really just take off, and then some do not. Bigger publishers, bigger names definitely take off more. And for this reason, I think it's really hard to get much out of 1 month because if you don't have a big name that's going to attract people, or I mean, sometimes your cover or something really does, but it can be hard to stand out. There's a lot of books on there, and people do look, I mean, very popular names are on there. So you gotta kind of stand out. And so I think it's hard to do that in 1 month. I usually don't recommend doing less than 3 months. It does depend on the price. I have a couple of people who have done a 1 month promo and they get a review here or there. Depends on your book, to be honest. Um, and the cost involved. So a lot of places are doing like NetGalley co-ops where they're putting a book up. They essentially buy a huge package of like how many books they can list in a month or at a time, and then they're selling off spaces there, which makes it very inexpensive. So if the price is right, you would give it a try. I say go for it, but I do think it's hard to stand out on NetGalley in less than 3 months. Publishers typically will do a 3 to 6 month run, and there's a reason for that because that's what works. Now, can you do less time? You can. I'm not sure of the results. I've only had couple people do that so far. Let's see. Is BookFunnel worth setting up to sell ebooks at a book event? It is easy to direct people to Amazon for ebooks, so can't decide. So the pros and cons of setting up a BookFunnel link for a book event specifically. Number one, your book cannot be on Kindle Unlimited, which is exclusive to Amazon. So make sure you're within those terms. As far as setting it up and why you might want to do it, well, the obvious reason is that if you sell through BookFunnel, you will gain more of the profits. And the other reason is that you get the reader's contact information. So you get their name and their email. You send someone to Amazon to sell your book, you still make a sale, you earn fewer profits, and you have the customer information. So that's something to consider. However, if you have people who are signing up for your mailing list right there at the event, then you don't have to worry about that so much. And if they're going to Amazon to buy, then that works. Also, some people like to buy direct, some people don't. Some people are like, oh, if it's not on Amazon and I can't just, click the buy now button, I'm not going to do it. So pros and cons, it depends on what your purposes are, how many events you're doing, how many things you're selling direct, how much of your audience is ebooks versus print books. Is it easy for you to set up BookFunnel, or is that like a big endeavor for you because you're not as tech savvy? So many different things. I don't think there's a wrong or right. I think there's what's right for you in that particular space. Regarding traditional publishers that allow for unagented direct submissions, do these publishers offer deals for the author where the author is offered a sum upfront? So that would actually be an advance, I think is what you're talking about, Lars. So in traditional publishing, most of the time, the kind of traditional route there is that a author will pitch agents and query agents. If an agent likes the book, they will say, yep, let's work together. The agent does not get paid by the author at that time. They sign them as a client, which gives the agent permission to pitch the book out to editors at different publishing houses and to different publishers. If the publisher does offer the author a deal, then the agent would step in and help negotiate that deal, and they in turn get 15%. And many publishing houses require you have an agent to submit. However, there are some publishers who, typically university presses or small press, that do not require a agent in order to submit. And in those cases, they will occasionally offer an advance. Most of the time they don't though, or if there is an advance, it's a very small advance. More often we see sometimes higher royalty rates, sometimes it's just a traditional deal, but no advance, which means that rather than being paid up front, an advance is literally, they're just paying you up front. And then they're like, all right, we paid you. So unless you earn enough royalties to cover that advance, they're not paying you. So if the advance is $100 and you get 10% royalties of a $10 book, that means you're earning $1 per book. So at $100 advance, you would have to sell 100 books, or the publisher would, before you make any more money. And then after that, you would earn the 10% or $1 per book. I simplified the math a lot so that I could do the math, but numbers vary. So there you go. But typically a small press, or if you are submitting directly to a publisher, they're not going to offer much of an advance, or they are going to offer a much lower advance. Sometimes we see somewhere between the $300 to $1,000 mark. But not very often do we see larger advances from traditional publishers when you can submit directly. There's always an exception for the exception. Someone's going to come out of the woodwork and say, well, I submitted directly and I got a $10,000 advance, which is fantastic, but that's not standard, I wouldn't say. And part of that, again, is how badly do they want the book and what negotiating power do you have? Really changes that quite a bit. Let's see. Yes. After what happened to Jane Friedman's work being stolen and reprinted by others, should an author consider trademarking their name? So her work wasn't actually stolen and reprinted by others. What did happen is people were using her name in her platform to sell garbage AI books about publishing, essentially what happened. And there was a big kerfuffle. She was able to get those down, and we've talked about that before, so I won't go into that too much. But as far as should you trademark your name, you can certainly think about it, and I am not a lawyer. I cannot give legal advice. I know just enough about this kind of stuff to be very dangerous. But to my understanding, when you are trademarking, number one, you have to trademark in a specific space. So, you're trademarking in books or in publishing, but you have to have reasonable proof, I guess I would say, that your name is tied to something specifically so much that it warrants trademarking. And you have to have a name that is unique enough that it's not going to cause a conflict. So example, if there's an author named Joe Smith who wants to trademark the name Joe Smith in books and publishing, it's probably not going to get approved because there's not enough proof that the name Joe Smith tied to that person really is a hallmark of their business, their work, that kind of thing. Jane Friedman has more of a unique name. She works specifically in the publishing space. She has a very large publishing platform where she talks about writing and things like that. She's checking the boxes on the things needed for trademark. So that is one of the things. And if you work with anyone for trademarking, these are the things they'll say and they'll talk about. So you do need to consider not only do you want to trademark your name, but do you have the platform for trademarking? Can you really say, yes, I've built a brand and a name in this, and it would hurt me as a business or financially to do that. So I don't think it's as easy as just should I trademark. I think it goes deeper into that. And then the next step is just as important. Trademark only works if you protect it. If someone is, using your trademark and you're not doing a cease and desist and getting the lawyers involved and going after them, then it just doesn't work. So you have to be willing and able to protect it, which means you have to be scanning for these things all the time, and all sorts of different things. And so, absolutely, it's one of the things to consider, but I think it's a little more complex than just doing it. And also, we have talked about this as well. Yes, it's happening. There are people who are writing back under the same name and different, but and there are horror stories. We've seen them right here on Free Advice Friday. We had someone who had this issue. But they don't happen as often as you might think. And will that change in the future? I don't know. We're in such a mist of different things happening with AI and trademark and copyright and all of these things. So I don't know how it'll play in the future, but um, it's worth considering. I don't think it's worth worrying, though, considering not worrying. And I think that's important. And yes, Bob is recommending Jane's newsletter in the chat. And I myself am a paid subscriber of Jane's newsletter. I think it's fantastic. It used to be called the Hot Sheet. She just rebranded as the Bottom Line. And I'm a big fan of her newsletter. I've been talking about it for years. So absolutely check that out if that's something you're interested in. And she also, it used to be a bi-weekly newsletter and it just moved to weekly. So some exciting changes happening over there. I just did something weird with my hair. All right. This one's a big one. And Bob just, or not just, in the beginning, he talked about kind of conversations with all these tariffs going on and how it's affecting publishing or going to affect publishing. And right now it really looks like it's going to affect publishing. But the specific question was, I'm in conversation with my team regarding the China tariffs and specifically how it will affect not only full color printed books, but many are afraid that their publishing house will not survive the hit without layoffs. Any thoughts on this? I have a lot of thoughts. Scary in here. I will say that for those who are printing print on demand, this will not typically really affect you. Not at the moment anyway. Now, when we get into, a lot of the paper that we use comes from Canada. And how will that affect the prices of printing and things down the line? That's certainly something to consider. But print on demand, I don't think will be the first affected by this. But the people who are going to be affected by these tariffs at the moment, the people affected by this are going to be the people doing offset print runs, the people doing big print runs. And many of those are coming from China, especially for full color print. So to give you an idea, if I have a book, I work with a publisher, and if we print it in the US and we get, let's just say 10,000 copies printed for this hardcover book, it costs us, even offset print, it's going to cost like $45. If we import from China, that book, even after all of the printing, the shipping and everything, it used to cost about $2.50. With these tariffs involved, obviously that's going to change that. It's going to change that. It's going to cost more for getting those books over here, which means then considering, are we printing here and paying more here? Are we going to pay the tariff and just have a smaller profit margin? And so many things involved in this. I'm simplifying for, just the purposes of discussion. And that will be very hard for especially the publishers and the publishing houses that tend to print a lot of color books, children's books. Full color art books are really going to be hit, I think, because those things typically do come out of China. It's easier to source printing for like a novel that's in black and white. I don't think we know how much or how it will affect, but it's definitely a legitimate concern. It's something that people in the publishing industry are watching as we look at things. So I'm not talking specifically politics here, but just about the cost of goods and selling as it may be. And yes, this is going to hit certain people harder. And we already know that publishing has slim margins. Selling books has slim margins. We also know that profit is made on something like 1% of books, which is amazing to me. That every book a publishing house takes on is essentially a gamble. They're hoping it pays off and they get lucky with a breakout book, which might happen, every year, every 2 years. And then most of their money is actually made back on those breakout hits, the 1%. But there are slim margins in publishing, and we know that when we're talking about how much, a publisher makes or an author makes by the time you take out production costs and then you have to offer a retail discount. And then you're paying for warehousing and you're paying staff to market the thing and you're paying for advertising. It is slim. And in a business that has had slim margins for a long time, when you deeply cut into profits by increasing production cost or the cost of the product, it's going to affect things. And how long it'll affect it, how deeply it will affect it, we don't know quite yet. But I do think that we will start seeing more and more about this as it hits the publishing industry. I think that a lot of the larger publishing houses tend to publish titles in the spring and in the fall. Most of the books that we're releasing in the spring were already printed and ordered prior to the new tariffs going on. And I think that we won't fully see how this affects things until the fall orders go in, which most people who have a fall book, they're sending in their print orders April or May. So I think we'll find out soon. I think that's why it's a big discussion. And I don't have much to say other than it makes sense how it would affect it. How much is something that I'm working to kind of watch and see and to explore just kind of how it's going to affect people and how it will affect the larger publishing houses again, more than the print on demand at the moment. It's something out there to watch, and I've got no good answers or no secret insights other than it makes sense that it's going to affect them. And yeah, we should be watching it. It might, I mean, again, it might just change the industry. It's what happened during COVID when everything shut down and the big publishers were so dependent on in-person sales, in-store sales. They had to learn how to pivot online. Indies were already doing this, and they made huge leaps and bounds during COVID because of this. The bigger publishing houses had to take their time to learn how to adapt. And I think this is kind of one of those moments where we might see this affecting larger publishers first, more than the indie publishers, and how that will change the long-term landscape of publishing, I'm not sure. But I'll be watching for the rest of you. And as I hear news or anything new, I will certainly let you all know. Let's see. I think we had one more. Oh, yes. I am sure we have all seen the article that came out in, I think it was the Atlantic, the article that came out about how, pirated books were teaching AI, Meta and different things that are going on. There was a big, big thing in the Atlantic for Meta used pirated books, supposedly, supposedly, AI was trained on pirated books and Meta did this. And so there is a big class action lawsuit and everything. There is a database called LibGen that was put out that you could actually search a book. So this is not, by the way, this is not new. This is not a new lawsuit. This has been going on for a long time, which was very, very interesting about this is that kind of amazing journalism here. What they did is they did a story about it and they tied it to a database you could search. So it took it from this like idea of, oh, they use pirated books, that's terrible, to putting a face to the name kind of thing. So by putting the database and having the LibGen database available for people to search their own name, their own books, they got people emotionally invested by my books are on there. How many of my books are on there? And so this is not a new thing, but it is something that's resurfacing because now people are seeing if their books were in there or not. And a lot of books, by the way, were in there. It is going to, class action at the moment, and who knows what will become of it. There are arguments as far as, if they're not, if, is it fair use if they're not making money or selling anything? So they're not, they're not selling the books or different things. So this is way above my pay grade in the lawsuit anyway, so it's not new. You can certainly check it. What can you do right now? I mean, you can certainly look into the class action lawsuit, but other than that, there's not much you can do. Yeah, what's done has been done. It's not worth, in my opinion, fretting over if you want to take action with the class action lawsuit and things like that. But as far as anything else, as far as, whether or not you should worry about it. Again, I don't think it's worth the energy of worrying. I think if you want to take action, do so, but it's not worth taking up the time and space in your head that could be spent on writing your next book. That's my personal opinion. And it's LibGen, LIBGEN is the database that you can search. And I did put the Atlantic article in the chat, so you can find that as well. Yeah, lots and lots of people are talking about it. Lots of differing opinions, which I think is funny. Lots of people talking about it. I don't think anyone has answers. I think there's a lot up in the air, a lot in the courts, and I've said this for a while. Stuff's going to be in the courts for a long time, and these big cases are going to be what decides the landscape of AI and publishing in the future. But they're not moving quickly. I mean, these are going to move at a snail's pace. It's already been going on for a long time. So is this worth getting yourself in knots over and being upset over? And of course you can be upset. I'm not saying you can't be upset, but it's not worth putting all of your energy in worrying or being upset because it's not going to get you anywhere. Do what you can do and then keep on writing, keep on doing what you do in the sense of, writing your books, marketing your books. Don't let this get you off course as an author. It's simply not worth it. And yes, I've seen a lot of my clients' books on that list. I've seen some big names and some, newer authors and all sorts of things. And it's okay to be upset. It's not okay to let that derail your focus from your career. So that would be my advice there. All right. So I think that's good for today. As I mentioned in the beginning of our call, I will not be doing Free Advice Friday next week. So on April 11th, we will be taking a little break and not be doing Free Advice Friday. I will be traveling with my family, so we won't be there. We will be back on the 18th, or at least that's my plan for now. If anything changes, I do try to update when the reminder goes out for Free Advice Friday on the morning of. I try to update that. So definitely watch that, but none on the 11th. I should be back on the 18th. And if you have questions, you can always email them in to info@newshelves.com. I'll just save them and answer them when I'm back. So you can always answer those. But I hope you all have a great off week, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Until then, keep on marketing, keep on doing all the things that make you really an author. The business part, the marketing part, the part you don't like, the part you love, just keep on going on. All right, everybody, I'll talk to you next time.